Real quick, I just want to pop in here to tell you that our Cube set surveys for Tarkir Dragonstorm and the accompanying Commander product are both out, so go to luckypaper.co and fill them out. Check the links in the description below. We're going to be really good this time about telling people about them, publicizing the surveys, and hopefully doing our set review episode in a reasonable time frame. Also, if you do have any hot takes about the set and you want to send in a voice memo, you can send it to mail@luckypaper.co or just find me on Discord or Blue Sky or whatever and send those in. Without any further ado, here's the episode.
Anthony's on the back foot here. He untaps, draws. He's going to need something here. Tapping 1 red mana for Thopter Engineer. This is going to give artifact creatures he controls haste. Okay, what's next? Now playing 1 more mana for a Farmstead Gleaner. And is it? Yes! Oh my god! It's Pathway Arrows! He's comboing off! He's comboing off! He's gonna do infinite damage to all of Andy's creatures and make a giant Farmstead Gleaner untap for lethal!
Great, here we go. I'm sure about that. I'm totally sure about that. And that's why I'm starting this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy. I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Anthony. Farmstead Gleaner is a combo card Maddox.
It's everybody's favorite combo, obviously, with Pathway Arrows. This is a classic multi-format combo, so I don't know why I'm being called out as specifically a Farmstead Gleaner enjoyer.
I'm excited for this episode, Anthony, because we have done the ABCs of aggro. I think it was like our 4th or 8th episode way back in the day. We should probably honestly re-record it because everything about the show is better now. We did our ABCs of aggro. We've done the ABCs of control. We haven't done mid-range yet, but I think combo is the other one people have been requesting, is the ABCs of combo. And I'll be honest, I don't generally have like imposter syndrome for talking about Magic on this show. We've talked about how we're not...
Oh, I do.
Well, you do a great job hiding it. We've talked about how we're not the best players, so we tend to stray away from giving any competitive advice because we know we're not suited for that. But you and I think a lot about cube design. I think we do have reasonable, useful things to say about it. But I have definitely felt a degree of apprehension around talking about combo because for the longest time, I did not identify as somebody that played, knew, or understood combos. And I think they are often kind of regarded as this pillar of complicated, high-skill Magic, being able to navigate combos in, especially, I think, a drafted limited environment. It's one thing to have a constructed deck that has a combo, learn how it works, and then pilot it. Not to minimize that, but I think especially in Cube, where you have a lot of kind of overlapping combos or combos with interchangeable pieces and just trying to make those decks work, it's not a thing I've done a lot as a player, and so I have felt like maybe combo is not the kind of thing we can talk about, at least until recently.
I mean, I definitely feel that. Like, as a player, I feel like that's a pretty big hole for me because, like you said, it's just not necessarily the kind of Magic that appeals to me. I think going back especially to when we were getting into the game, getting into Commander, the fact that people would just be like, oh yeah, now I just play these 2 cards, and it's like, what? And now you just win and the game's over and it doesn't, there's like no satisfying back and forth, there's no reward. And obviously if you're playing Magic in a different, more competitive environment where you understand the meta, of course there's a lot of back and forth, but in that specific context it just felt like total downside to me, and so I definitely shied away from that. And when I transitioned into playing mostly Cube, and before that playing Limited, in both of those cases combo was just not a major feature of those formats.
Yeah, when you're playing Commander, a format where nobody reads anybody else's cards, then it definitely
I think at the time people read other cards more.
This was more in the period of reading each other's cards. It was easier to do, but yeah, I think it's a whole different conversation, combo in multiplayer, combo in Commander, which we're not going to go down today. But I do want to talk more about it in Cube. And you said that it's not your preferred playstyle, but I do want to point out, you put Farmstead Gleaner and Pathway Arrows in the Turbo Cube.
I didn't mean to.
Did you really not mean to?
No, I don't think so. I mean, to be honest, I think that here's what's really fun about combos is discovering them. Finding 2 cards that just like together do something infinitely or arbitrarily large is really exciting. And I think that maybe even when I was more invested in new sets coming out, that could be an exciting thing about, like, oh, I have this commander deck that's all about XYZ. Is there going to be some card that I can figure out and like solve this combo myself and add to my deck and do something very cool? But that is a very different experience from approaching a constructed format with an established meta, and it just feels like homework. Just like, yeah, if you want to play this format, the table stakes are you have to learn this list of 2 cards that interact in certain ways. And in the context of Cube, and in the context of the Turbo Cube especially, this is my very silly cube where all spells and abilities cost 2 generic mana less.
Which makes a lot of combos just happen.
Right, so normally it's like, well, this wouldn't be a combo because it would cost 4 mana every time you want to do this thing, but now each of those 2 things is discounted, and so they cost nothing, and so now it just is an infinite combo immediately. And it was kind of an experience of it being fun to discover combos from scratch. And honestly, there are some that we keep finding. What is that little silly card? Sin and Sanctum.
I still feel proud that I discovered this for the first time, at least I'm aware of, in a draft of the Turbo Cube. I was just like, this card seems like...
And then I can do this, and then I can do it again, and then I'll do it forever. Yeah. I do this forever.
Yeah, for those that want to know, it's Sin and Sanctum and Archaeomender will go infinite with each other, but all they do is give you infinite casts of Sin and Sanctum and ETBs of Archaeomender. So you got to figure out something to do with that, but it is doable.
Sure, just have an Aetherflux Reservoir in play. And obviously you can go check the cards mentioned page to read what those specifically do. But yeah, I mean, I haven't really thought through this before, but I do really enjoy those combos because I was there at the ground floor as people have and are continuing to discover them. And like I said before, it feels very different than just having to do your homework and just know a bunch of facts. I mean, this is also goes back to something that Parker wrote a whole article about trivia checks and those kinds of different moments where the really satisfying gameplay experiences are when you're leveraging your heuristics and able to synthesize new strategies and information from your experience. I mean, these are both skills in Magic. They're both things that make you better, but what he called trivia checks, these moments where it's like, yeah, you just have to know how this works. You have to have done your homework, and now you can succeed in this specific gameplay moment. To me and to many other players, those are just not satisfying.
I think it's not satisfying to fail a trivia check. That feels cheap. I think
that's a good point.
Realistically, players are passing trivia checks all the time, and it just feels like second nature, and those ones don't annoy anybody. But this is not the time to go into detail about that either, to be frank, because I want to talk more about what the presence of these sort of combos does to a cube environment. And what you're getting at here is a reasonable thing, right? Counterplay can feel polarized, and it can feel bad. I witnessed somebody pull off, for the first time, honestly, I've seen the Heliod Walking Ballista combo in the Turbo Cube, which is a funny one to include to me because...
That one is funny.
It's actually a real combo. Like, you don't need the turbo discount for that to work.
But there are some other cards that can then play the function of the ballista, so it's like...
Are there?
Yeah, Monoskelion at least. I think there's maybe one other. But I think we talked about this. We're going to cut Heliod. So yeah, all of the combos that are in there will be turbo-specific combos after that change.
Right. The point of my story was just that I saw somebody do this thing for the first time that their opponent had ever seen, and that is definitely a bummer of a moment for anybody to be like, oh, I guess I lose to this thing I've never seen before. Now, I think a really curious, open-minded, open-hearted player might be like, wow, that's really cool. I never knew that was a thing you could do in Magic. But I think 95% of people are just like, oh, I didn't realize that if you combine those 2 cards, then I lose. And that feels especially bad in a draft context, because you might have seen in past some combination of those 2 cards, and the idea that your opponent had some secret knowledge going into the draft that you did not have, feels bad, I think, to people. So,
and especially in a draft where you're playing with a bunch of new cards, and maybe you had a sorcery speed removal spell, and you just didn't remove one of the pieces because you didn't know that was an option. That could be pretty frustrating.
So, I think it's worth trying to define what we talk about when we say a combo, because this, definitions are one of the hardest things to talk about on this show, and people will always have disagreements about them.
Let's just not.
No,
you know it when you see it.
No, I mean, I think it's important that we not assume that everyone else's know it when they see it is the same as our know it when we see it. That's the whole point of us trying to define it. You don't have to agree with our definition, but I want to describe what we're talking about that we're choosing to call combo right now. If you call combo something else, fine. This is just us describing what this episode is about.
Okay, so combo is a spectrum. There's a long tail. It's descriptive, not prescriptive.
I do think it is a spectrum, and I think basically you have like completely fair bare bones magic. You're playing creatures and you're attacking and blocking with them. Maybe you have a removal spell or a combat trick. Then you have synergy, and you're kind of working your way up this spectrum. And synergy is where you combine two cards to become a little more than the sum of their parts, right? Like these two cards interact in a way that they both get noticeably better with the presence of the other one.
So either that's like a card that says gets a +1/+1 counter, and a card that says whenever you get a +1/+1 counter, you draw a card.
Sure, exactly.
Or 2 1-mana 2/1s.
That's further down the spectrum.
Okay.
Because, if you remove one of those 2/1s, the other one is not any less. They're still just a 1-mana 2/1, right? Like, they're not actually actively. I understand what you're saying.
But together, they might increase the average win percentage of a deck.
But,
so I think
contributing to a broad strategy, I think, is far down on the fundamental, far from combo end of the spectrum. Like, yes.
Fair.
It's good to have more than one counterspell in a deck.
2 Goblin Guides is a combo.
But that's not what we're talking about, right?
Okay.
And I appreciate your trying to poke holes for thoroughness, but I think you can understand that that's a different thing, right? Like, cards definitely contribute to similar strategies. Your second and third counterspell are better because you have more counterspells, more turns you can hold up instant speed interaction, but that does not make 2 counterspells a combo, nor does it make 2 Goblin Guides a combo. Anyway, look, here's the thing. As you work your way up the synergy spectrum, cards become more powerful thanks to the presence and interactions with other cards in your deck. And I think basically as you keep walking up that spectrum, somewhere you cross a blurry line into combo. And when you get to combo, for me, what defines it is you've combined cards in some extremely synergistic way such that you are getting some game material at a massively undercosted rate, right? And that massively undercosted rate could be effectively 0, right? Like, if you think about Splinter Twin, you are getting a copy of Deceiver Exarch for effectively 0, and you can get as many of them as you want, and so you have, kind of broken the resource system, right? You've done something that allows you to get a resource at a rate that is so far removed from what it reasonably should cost that it starts to resemble a combo.
Yeah, I think that there's a very hard line that we could draw of just what we call in a lot of games demonstrating a loop. Like, I can do this, and I can do it forever. Like, the inputs to the system balance out the outputs, so it costs nothing. And that's definitely a combo. Like, those cases are very clear.
I don't think anyone's going to argue about those. Yeah.
There are some, like you're describing with Synod Sanctum. We should get away from Turbo Cube loops, but
I think we should talk about the combos we know. How many times have you actually Splinter Twinned off in a cube?
I put Splinter Twin on a Arbor Stomper. Does that count?
This is part of why I have this
Gain
kind of
4 life a turn.
This is part of why I have this, a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'm not sure I've ever pulled off a Splinter Twin Kiki combo in a drafted environment. Not once. And obviously, I think that's a dated combo reference. People are going to be like, that's not even popular in the Magic going. Yeah, sure. Swap in, Frantic Search, Underworld Breach, whatever combo line you like. Most of the sort of vintage cube combos are not things you and I have ever done, and certainly not things we're even remotely close to being experts on. So I think we should talk about the combos we know, which are, Pathway Arrows and Farmstead Gleaner. They are Synod Sanctum and Archaeo Mender. I have a lot of combos in my cubes I'll get to talk about, but yeah, a lot of these combos, the infinite ones, I think we can agree. Everyone's
Ruthless
it's a combo.
Knave and Gravecrawler plus another zombie. That's a cool one.
Yeah, but so that's where we get to the interesting ones, though, because I think everyone agrees, demonstrate a loop that is netting a resource.
Right, so that's actually what I was going to try to get to is, you can demonstrate a loop that doesn't actually produce anything, it doesn't actually advance the game, and that's where it's like, oh wait, is this a combo if I'm not actually able to do anything? And it's like, that's where the two things that are very overlapping of combo and loops don't overlap exactly, maybe, where you might be like, that's not really a combo. And then we also have stuff that, like Storm, that is maybe not strictly a combo, but you're like, I'm pretty sure this is mostly mana positive, and so I can probably get there eventually. So it is sort of a blurry line. A loop is one of the more concrete things we can say, but there are a lot of other facets to it.
Yeah, and what I was just trying to say is that I don't think anybody disagrees that you're going infinite, you're doing a loop that is generating some resource, that is for sure a combo. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. I think as you sort of walk a little bit down that spectrum to things like, Archaeo Mender, Synod Sanctum, you're just doing a thing over and over again, you are not netting any resources, you got to figure out a way to make that somehow work. Or an example that's currently in Sacred Geometry, it might not last, is Gravecrawler and War and Soul Trader.
But it does cost you a life every time.
That's a combo that just loses you a life every loop. So, that as it's on its own doesn't do anything except for lose you a life every time, and you can never do it infinitely unless you have infinite life, so you're mostly just doing this some deterministic number of times. But the point is, 1 life for a 2/1 is a broken rate, right? It's still an obscene rate to get a card for compared to what creatures should cost in Magic. So that sort of relationship between what you're actually paying for the resource and what it should cost by like the vanilla test of resources in whatever meta you're playing in, I think kind of determines how far up that combo spectrum you are. And Storm is a great example, right? When you cast Empty the Warrens and get 38 goblins, 4 mana for 38 goblins is an obscene rate to get goblins for. You have done a combo, and you have not gone infinite, but I think you're definitely in combo territory when you are getting goblins for that crazy good rate, or, draining your opponent with Tendrils of Agony, right? Same thing. If you're getting an incredible rate on a card, then you have done something that resembles or is starting to approach a combo.
I want to ask, is Reanimator a combo? But I don't know if that's a very interesting question to ask.
I have always maintained that I think Reanimator is absolutely a combo deck, and it is one of the combo decks that has the most overlap with cards that you would also play in Fair Magic. And so for that reason, I think we see Reanimator strategies often in cubes that otherwise would consider themselves to be combo-free, because the outcome of that combo is a creature, and most decks are going to have some kind of interaction for creatures, right? As opposed to Storm, there's so few ways to interact with Storm, right? Like, I think having a Storm deck present in a cube that's otherwise fair for a lot of people feels like you're just playing parallel games and you're not actually interacting with each other, whereas Reanimator is a broken rate. If you're getting a Grizzlebrand or Archon of Cruelty or an Atraxa, whatever, for 1 mana and some life, or 2 mana and it has 1 less power, that's a crazy rate. I think you are definitely on the combo spectrum. I think it gets a pass from a lot of people that otherwise don't like combos just because, yeah, your creature removal still works on it. Fair decks might still want the reanimation spells. Discard outlets are things that lots of decks want. It has just a lot of pieces that overlap with other kinds of fair decks. But I absolutely think that Reanimator is a combo deck by my definition.
I'm happy not to make a firm stance on that. It's somewhere in this space.
Yeah. I mean, is it as much of a combo deck as Bomberman? Probably a little bit less. No, I think Bomberman's more of a combo deck.
That sounds like a combo.
Yeah, for sure. It's got a name and everything. I want to talk about the combos we know and love from our own cubes. So Turbo Cube talked about Farmstead Gleaner Pathway Arrows. What is the actual outcome of that combo? You know it better than I do. You get to do infinite damage to creatures?
Infinite damage to creatures. So the way it works is you equip your Farmstead Gleaner, you tap it with the equipment to deal 1 damage to something, and then Farmstead Gleaner has the very fun untap symbol, which something weird's going to happen when you see the untap symbol, to put a counter on the Farmstead Gleaner, and then you just keep doing that back and forth. And
so you get an infinitely big Farmstead Gleaner, and you kill your opponent's creatures. So absent them having like a removal spell for your creature, you get to kill them that turn because you get to attack with a giant Farmstead Gleaner.
Yeah, can you even just deal damage to your opponent directly? I don't think you can.
I feel like
one
I've
of those
seen
things
people
where it's like,
kill creatures with it so often that I can't imagine you could, because otherwise they would just do that, right?
Sometimes you also have to target, if your opponent has no creatures, you might have to target, maybe you can even target the Gleaner itself. And
is it all instant speed? Couldn't you just target?
You can target, you can put a bunch on the stack and target one individual creature.
Yeah. Times hit
and
that
it's
creature.
just fun to imagine the narrative of just like, here's this little scarecrow, and you give it a bow and arrow, and suddenly it machine guns everything on the board and gets tremendous, and then rolls over you.
And so that is effectively an instant win if you resolve the combo, right? Like, I guess there's probably
It does need haste as well.
Sure, but I mean, if you get to start doing the thing, unless they have some way to get rid of like an attacking creature. I mean, obviously, if they had a way to disrupt the combo, they would just disrupt it.
If they have a disenchant, that's another funny thing about combos that I think introduces a bunch of extra trivia checks, which is that even if there is interaction, often you have to do it at the right time and like respect what your opponent is doing in a very detailed way that you normally wouldn't in a game of Magic. So like,
this one you can just go off in response to a disenchant or whatever.
Right, but if I activate it, I guess you can't disrupt it. It gets tricky because I tap it and then it is tapped as part of the cost, which means if you try and disenchant, I can untap it. If I put
untapping, I assume part of the cost. I assume it's before
is also part of the cost.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that one you're pretty much safe from a disenchant.
But you might not die to the Farmstead Gleaner, obviously, if you can just kill it.
But you can keep putting a bunch of triggers in the stack
Gleaner
to kill stuff. Magic is crazy.
So is this combo to you meaningfully different from a, Kiki Jiki Deceiver Exarch combo? Like, does it feel in its texture like something you like more, or is it just that, hey, these are two like funny cards that no one ever thought of as combo cards, and it's cute to include them in the Turbo Cube where they're a combo here and nowhere else, but do you acknowledge that like it basically is the same? 2 cards, you win the game 99% of the time.
Right. I mean, if we went Ben Stark mode and just put, there's no flavor on these cards at all, they just are numbers and, IDs of what they do, then yeah, that would be functionally the same. You put these two cards on, they interact in a way that you can win the game instantly. I think so much of it is that aesthetic experience. The fact that it is
totally valid.
Here's this very silly cube, and yes, you can do a combo, but it's not just doing the combo you're familiar with at a more efficient rate. You're doing this silly combo with two cards that are completely forgettable, like Draft Chaff, that you've forgotten about. And the fact that it is this sort of combo that we discovered, I think all of that makes it a lot more fun and interesting. And I also do think, to be clear, that I think Pathway Arrows is a very cool card in this cube. The fact that you can also, the other thing you can do with it is, because the equip is discounted, if you just have a bunch of creatures, you put it on one, ping something, and move it to your next creature and ping something. And there is really interesting play to it.
It's not just for the combo in this cube.
Right. But it's difficult to get people to put it in their deck without the combo. So that's kind of something that I like about it, where it's like, okay, I wouldn't normally put this in my deck, but now I know that every once in a while I'll draw both these cards together and win the game instantly. So I'm going to have these fun moments with Pathway Arrows, which is, I think, a cool thing that combo enables, even if it sort of like comes at the cost of sometimes games are less interactive.
What about the Synod Sanctum Archaeo Mender combo, which is a great example of one where these are two cards that do a thing infinitely, but you got to figure out some way to benefit from that, right? So you also need something that benefits from you casting an artifact spell or sacrificing something. And there's a lot of things in the cube you can combine with this to make it do something positive. But by default, you get a sacrifice and an artifact cast trigger and a creature ETB as many times as you want, basically.
Right. I mean, it's just really easy for some of those things to happen. Like, you've got your Monastery Mentor, you've got your Sai, you've got Chromos Seed Shark, you have Aetherflux Reservoir. Those are kind of the best payoffs. And there's a couple Storm-ish cards, so it's pretty easy for those to go infinite. Again, one of my favorite things, similar to the Pathway Arrows about this, is that Synod Sanctum is just always so much fun to play. It's like,
because no one's ever seen it before.
No one's ever seen it before, and you're like, I guess this is okay. And then whenever you have it, there's so many cool little things you can do with it. Like, you just blink a land to make some mana, or blink a creature with an ETB, or blink something to foil a removal spell. There's just so many little things you can do with it that it's a really fun card to play with. So the fact
I take
that
it really highly in that cube. I think it's like so flexible and powerful.
Yeah. And like, those are the cards that keep me excited about the Turbo Cube, where it's like, this is not a obviously broken card, but it just functions totally differently than you would expect, and is kind of this unique card that there are a lot of cards that are like, oh, this is it's like a Signet that turns into a Mox or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, those are cards that are powered up in a way that it is a known quantity. There isn't really a card exactly like Synod Sanctum in the broken sense in normal Magic.
Not that I'm aware of. It doesn't do even remotely the same things, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of Sensei's Divining Top, in that it's like this thing that's very difficult to interact with, and it like does some kind of fiddly thing, and you're like, well, how is that good? And then it turns out that it is actually very good. But yeah, that's not a thing in normal Magic really at all. So I think it's very appealing here. It's kind of funny that like in these radical context shift cubes, there are certain cards that are like exciting to the players that have never played these cubes before, right? And for them, it's like the eggs and stuff like that.
Or then, like a 1-mana 3/3 with haste that makes a bunch of tokens.
Or
it's like,
Mere
wow,
Superior,
that card's
right?
insane.
Like, yeah, it's some suite of cards that are really exciting to people that are like totally new to this novel environment. And then there's a set of cards that are like really exciting to people like you and I that have played it dozens of times, that are like, yeah, I mean, I'm still taking an egg. I still want to put it in my deck from a like spike perspective, but I've done that enough that it's not like, that's not new for me anymore. And so it's like, cool, that's the power of this environment. I'm still going to take it and put it in my deck. But what I'm excited about is Synod Sanctum or whatever, these sort of like tricky little cards you can do a variety of different things with.
Yeah, the other card that feels very much in the same space as that is Mirage Mirror.
Yes.
This is a card that just, it keeps going up in my both power level estimate, but is always just so much fun to play with. So this is a card that just lets you copy another permanent, but it's important that once you copy something, it loses that copy ability, so you can only do it once.
Unless.
But there's a lot of weird, like we were saying with putting a bunch of copies of an effect on the stack with Pathway Arrows, you can do the same thing with the Mirror, where you can just put a whole bunch of copies of the copy effect on the stack, and then
you get one instant speed moment of priority to use whatever ability from the card you've copied in reverse order, which is like, so I mean, pretty crazy.
Maybe it's, you have one creature that has a tap ability, and then you have Farmstead Gleaner that has the untap ability. You can ping pong back and forth, copy your creature with the tap ability, copy your Steel Overseer, and then target your Farmstead Gleaner, go back and forth, and you're like,
so
okay,
put like 100,000 targets where they're
100,000
alternating, they're interweaved, and then you get to go back and forth and do those things repeatedly. It is very fun.
And it also works really interestingly with these I had to talk with judges for a while and make sure we understood this correctly, but works with creatures that have an ability that can only be activated one time a turn. So Salvaged Mana Worker, you can pay 1 mana to generate a mana of any color once a turn. So this is just a creature that's a Mox, but same thing, if you have the Mirage Mirror, you copy the Salvaged Mana Worker, then you target a land, then you target the Mana Worker,
Wait,
and you
really?
go back and forth
That
forever.
works?
Yeah. And then you get to make infinite mana.
I thought for sure that didn't work. That's crazy.
It also works with 3 bowls of porridge, because the mirror does not remember that it had already been porridge before.
I remember the porridge ruling. I guess it is the same. Yeah.
It's the same. Everything is porridge if you think about it long enough.
So talk to me about why you, somebody who self-described in the intro as somebody that doesn't enjoy the play patterns of combos, have put these and many more. There are more combos in the Turbo Cube we haven't touched on. A lot of it involving Ruthless Knave.
Yet to be discovered.
And I'm sure maybe some others to be discovered that are more complicated with more moving pieces. Why did you include them in the Turbo Cube?
I mean, part of it is what we've already talked about it being kind of this journey of discovery that we as a play group have gone on. Another part is just the expectations for this specific cube, where I'm not playing the Turbo Cube for good, clean, fair magic and to always feel like I had a lot of agency, and it's all about the little edges of using my removal spells correctly and evaluating combat correctly. This is the cube where I'm going all out and expect silly things to happen, and for those silly things to sometimes be a literal combo, in addition to often it just being like, I just dump so many resources on the board so quickly that I'm overwhelming you before you have a chance to do anything. It feels much more at home in this cube. And like so many things, it really is, having a fun time is about having the correct expectations going into it. So I don't think that some literal combos, some loops, break the expectations that you're already going into for the experience of the Turbo Cube, if expectations have been set correctly.
So is your answer basically that you still don't like this kind of magic, but you have this cube to do it occasionally, and the expectations are appropriately set here for you, even yourself. Like,
yeah.
So it's just that the Turbo Cube is not really for you, even though, but you still don't identify as a player that likes combo, despite putting a bunch of combos in one of your cubes. You just also identify as a player that doesn't like one of their cubes.
It's fun to do the combo. It's fun when you do understand. Like you said, it is fun when you know the trivia checks. But it is fun for me, like every 2 months, maybe. This is not the cube that I want to play every single week.
My relationship to combo is much the same as yours. My first cube, the Bun Magic Cube, which is an eternal, powerful, fair magic environment. Fair has always been a descriptor I've used to describe that cube. And what I mean by fair mostly is that when I described this relationship between resources and the rate you're paying for them, by fair, I mean you're never getting to really go too far up that spectrum of getting a too absurd rate for anything in that cube. There's a lot of powerful stuff you can do, but you're never getting creatures for 1 life or a card for a mana as many times as you want. You're always paying within sort of a range of a reasonable rate for all these effects, which means no combo. And I started describing Reanimator as combo, I don't know, 6 years ago when I cut it from this cube and was like, this actually feels wrong to me. The more I've actually sort of refined this environment, the more having a deck that can put a Grizzleband in play on turn 2 just feels wrong. It doesn't feel like it is in dialogue with the rest of what the decks are doing. So I also felt like combo was not for me. I felt like it was something I didn't have access to. I couldn't understand it. Maybe I couldn't design it properly in a cube. I was worried about breaking a cube if I put combos in there. And so I just sort of instead focused on fair magic, and that was my primary and only cube for the longest time.
I think there's something really, really valuable in that, and sort of to think about the way that we define terms and make that a useful experience is that you, the listener, might not agree with the definition of combo being breaking sort of summarize that again, breaking the resource rules, getting something for more efficient than is within bounds normally.
Yeah, just changing the rate on a resource by a huge amount by combining some cards, right? If drawing a card normally costs 1 mana and now you're drawing 6 cards for 1 mana, you've done a combo. You're right. Bad boy.
So you, taking that definition, then look at your cube, and now that gives you a new way to say, why does Reanimator feel wrong here? And it's because it's crossing this line that I have. In a different definition, maybe it didn't seem like it crossed, but now that I'm using this definition, it does seem to cross, and that's giving you a real understanding of why that feels inappropriate, where it didn't necessarily feel before, and led you to create a cube that was closer to your goals. So it's you don't have to agree with the terms to use them as a way to frame something, to understand something in a better way.
Right, and what I want this conversation to mostly be about is how to think about combo as a design tool as a cube designer, because like you, my first and primary cube, I just was like, I'm checking out of combo. Like, I do not want it, and by my definition, that is anything that can get something for a really above rate. And so I can look through the list and see what decks are capable of doing that. And oh, look, this one deck is capable of putting an 8/8 in play on turn 2. No other deck comes even close to that, right? Like, the ramp deck is never coming close to that. The tempo deck is never coming close to that, right? Like, control decks can't do that. It's just a thing that is so overblown in this one way that it doesn't feel like it fits. But I have since designed many more cubes, and I would say every other cube I've designed has had combo as a pretty central part of that cube. The first one after the Bun Magic cube, that was like one of my big cube design projects, is the Degenerate Micro Cube, which the whole thesis of that cube is me supposing that 2-card combos, generally speaking, are not super fun in 40-card limited because you both have to draft both pieces and then also find them in a given game, which is not always easy because your deck is 40 cards, and depending on how long the game lasts, you might just not draw both of them. And me just kind of taking the idea that combo belongs alongside Fair Magic and also throwing that out the window and say, what if combo just belonged alongside more combo and like Punisher for combo decks, basically. The Degenerate Micro Cube, you draft only 15-card decks. All of the rules of Magic are the same, except you don't lose from mill, and then you are basically, playing fast combo against other fast combo or decks that are designed specifically in the meta where fast combo is the one thing to do. So you also have like a Hate Bears deck, which kind of resembles what you could do maybe in a more typical cube, but it's radically recontextualized by the fact that you play Thalia, Interferon Wingmare, and now your opponent just can't cast spells anymore, right? Like, you just completely lock him out of the game. So it actually plays very differently despite the cards maybe being superficially similar. So
this cube is basically you just saying, like, well, you smoked one cigarette, now you gotta smoke the whole pack.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, for sure. And I had a lot of fun with that cube for a long time, and it was especially, like, important to me over the sort of darkest period of the COVID-19 pandemic, and being able to play this remotely with friends and work on it was, like, really a focus of my sort of interest in the game. That cube is so far in the back burner for me now. I've actually started picking cards out of it here and there to put them into other cube projects and just leaving little slips of paper in the sleeves.
I've definitely left some IOU one Gaia's Cradles in some games.
I do. I've done that a couple times, and I think the reason is because, again, the sort of founding principle of that cube was me supposing that in some way Fair decks and combo decks were incompatible in the same environment. They were going to be playing sort of parallel games. And so I've got my Fair Magic, Bun Magic cube, and let's have the Degenerate, everybody's doing combo cube. But it was based on this idea that these things, for my envisioning of what a game should be in Magic, just couldn't really coexist in a way that I'd be happy with. It would feel like, yeah, your entire game was completely negated by your opponent's 2-card combo, so all of your considerations towards tempo and how your curve works and everything I like about Magic would just not matter in that game because you didn't happen to have an instant speed removal spell, which is all you needed to stop that combo, right? It becomes less about does your deck strategy work against your opponent and more about do you have the one specific type of answer you need right now for this combo or do you lose? But since then, the two other cubes I've spent the most time working on are 100 Ornithopters and my Neoclassical cube, which are both cubes that do have traditional 40-card decks. They have no rules modifications, either of them, and they do also have combos in both those cubes that do coexist along fair decks, and I have found that to be, I only really did that kind of because I was like, I made that decision accepting that I was probably going to lead to a bunch of games that were not going to fit my ideal gameplay vision, kind of like we were describing with the Turbo Cube. You're like, look, this is about this thing, so let's just let this thing be the focus, and if that means that some games are nonsense, then whatever. For the Neoclassical Cube, I wanted it to be all about the vibes of old school Magic. I wanted a place to play weird old broken cards and weird old broken combo cards like Mind Over Matter or whatever. And so I was like, I'm just going to put them in there and just accept that this is the cube for retro vibes. And retro Magic was a lot about doing kind of broken stuff sometimes.
I mean, and your favorite thing to do is play Fastbun and a bunch of bounce lands and then a Time Twister or Time Spiral. And
yeah. Great example of none of that's infinite, none of that's a loop, but that is for sure a combo. You should not get 6 lands on turn 1. That is not a good rate.
That's not allowed. You're breaking the rules.
Yeah. So yeah, there's Storm in the Neoclassical Cube. There's Fast Bond. There's various Mind Over Matter combos. There are combos present in that environment. And I have actually found that it does not lead to anywhere near as many nonsense games that sort of don't meet my goals as maybe I initially expected, right? Like maybe my concerns as somebody who really had not played almost any combo and then only really focused on it in a cube that was just combo. So as somebody that hadn't played a lot of fair decks alongside combo decks, I think I had this presumption that they just were incompatible. And maybe I found that they actually are a lot more compatible than I initially thought through the Neoclassical Cube and the 100 Ornithopters Cube, where I mean, Ornithopters is a little different because those games can be nonsense for Ornithopter reasons, right? Like, there's multiple reasons that games can be nonsense in that cube, and I definitely have a higher tolerance for that there, in the same way you have a higher tolerance for that in the Turbo Cube. But especially in Neoclassical, the combos are mostly not two-card you win the game combos, right? Are there any of those even? I'm not even sure there are. There are some really powerful synergies, right? Like, you get Mind Over Matter and Arcanus the Omnipotent, and you get to draw your whole deck, and then make probably an arbitrarily...
Okay, I am tired of losing to that one. That one's a bummer.
Are you actually?
A little bit. Oh. I'm tired of just like not having a removal spell and my opponent just casts out Arcanus and I'm just like, well, I'm gonna lose now.
All you need is a removal spell or disenchant and you have a whole turn to see it coming. It doesn't have haste.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think it's also possible that so part of what I think you're saying is just that it comes up less often in Cube Draft than you might think, because it takes a lot of pieces, even just to have two cards. You gotta find them, you gotta draft them, you have to draw them, and if you don't have a lot of tutors, that isn't going to happen many games. Is it possible that we've also just been a little bit tainted by our Magic experience and the fact that we kind of encountered combo for the first time in Commander? Because in that context, it's like, all right, we've set up this game, we've been playing for... I don't know, 6, 7, 8 hours.
We've been playing since
and it's
Sunday.
Like,
it's now Wednesday.
And now you just like end the game all of a sudden. It's like I can't imagine a worse context to experience combo. Whereas if you're playing a Cube Draft, you're playing 3 games per match, which means if your opponent does the combo, now you know they have it. Like, now you have a chance to keep up that piece of instant speed removal. Or just play your outs, which is be aggressive and try and get them before they have a chance to do it.
Kill them before they can resolve a 6-mana enchantment and a 6-mana creature and then have it untap with...
It sounds impossible, but apparently it's true. Some people can do it. I mean, do you think that's a factor in our own personal experience?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I think I'm probably definitely tainted and hurt by Commander.
We've all been hurt by Commander.
We all need to like unpack the various ways that Commander has hurt us secretly and silently over the years in ways that were just invisible.
Commander made us think it was normal. This is just the way it has to be.
I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal. Yeah, I think that's probably a big factor there. And yeah, what it comes down to is that my perception of a combo deck when I was primarily watching vintage cube drafts and trying to fashion my own cube in the spirit of that cube, but quite different, because even from the early days, I was not planning on doing any of the broken combo stuff. I looked at the Splinter Twin decks and the Storm decks and was like, all right, those are the decks I don't want to include. But my perception of those combo decks were that they were hyper-focused, right? Like, all my deck does is this combo, everything sort of serves this combo, and the idea of nuance and adapting to what your opponent is doing and all of the sort of back and forth and interaction that's inherent in a game of Magic between decks that care about tempo and care about, resources just goes out the window. But in reality, that's just not how almost any combo deck works, especially in a drafted environment where you don't have the luxury of just perfectly crafting your 60 cards to be whatever you want it to be. In reality, almost every combo deck I've experienced in a 40-card limited set or cube is like it's like an out. It's an out if the game goes super long and you get a bunch of resources. It's an out if you happen to draw things in the right order and your opponent doesn't have removal. But it's not what your deck is primarily doing. I think Arlo described this as like a fair deck with a combo finish, right? Is what a lot of these combo decks end up being. Or if it is kind of committal, right? Like some of my Mind Over Matter decks have been more committal to like the combo. Like that is my eventual end game. But in that case, the combo is so expensive and requires so much late game that like what my deck is about is getting to that state, right? And then it's like, I'm winning with this because it's more efficient to win with this than it is to play a Morphling with enough mana to protect it indefinitely and attack you over and over again for the 7 turns it will take to kill you with Morphling and get through your blockers, right? Like, you could have the same deck with that win condition. It's just that putting the Mind Over Matter, Arcanus, Kamal combo in there or something just means that you have like a different way to close out a game that you have to otherwise have already use your deck strategy to get to.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great observation, and I definitely fell prey to this earlier in my Cube experience, where I would see people draft combo decks, and they would say, well, yeah, you just play these 2 cards, and then you win the game. It's great. It's very easy. And then I would try and do that, and I would fail. And I think that it was because I was fundamentally misunderstanding it. And really, combo decks, like you're saying, I see 2 big categories. One is just a control deck that will win with some combo eventually. And like you're saying, it's like I've played against plenty of control decks that kill me eventually with a 4/4 flyer, and it doesn't really matter, but like it would have been quicker if they just had a combo. So like honestly, might have been more fun just to end the game faster than let me agonize for 4 turns on can I draw 3 removal spells to get around your counter spells to kill your 4/4. Probably not.
And especially in the examples we're giving here, like those combo pieces function and undo things before they are actually combo pieces, right? I have used Mind Over Matter to tap down my opponent's big threat turn over turn for a whole card just because I'm like, that's going to kill me. And so I'm going to spend a card every turn just to keep it from killing me and buy time until I can hopefully turn this into a combo. Or you just play a Fair Arcanist. That's just a 3/4 that you can use to block and draw some cards if you untap with it, and that's totally fine in a lot of control decks.
Right.
So it gives you additional texture to what the deck does, because now you have these tools that are not meant for playing this sort of control role necessarily, but you can adapt them to that when they also have the inevitability of this will become part of my game-winning combo.
That's a good point. I mean, just like playing Pathway Arrows in your Turbo Cube deck, like you're not ordinarily going to put Mind Over Matter in your deck unless you have the combo, but then it still will do other things, which is cool. And it's cool that unlike something like Splinter Twin, where maybe you just really want to hold on to it because like that's really critical, Mind Over Matter you eventually do need to get in play, and it's not like you're committing to putting it on one particular creature, so you have that opportunity.
Splinter Twin is interesting because one half of the combo has flash historically, and then the idea is that you don't ever go for it until you can flash it on your opponent's end step, untap and combo, and hopefully they're like tapped out, right? You try and find a moment where you get to do both sides of it. I do tend to prefer combos that require just more investment, where it's like, I got to play 6 mana for this enchantment, and if I don't already have Arcanus or Gilded Lotus or whatever in play, like it's going to be really hard for me to immediately do something really powerful with this. It's going to be this incremental sort of build up, which does give you room to actually have some interaction for it, right?
True,
which I think is different than maybe the sort of Golden Path Splinter Twin plan we all know of, like turn 3, end step this, untap with 4 mana, Splinter Twin, you're dead.
Yeah, and then I think in addition to the control with the combo finish deck is the fair deck that's using those pieces in other ways and sometimes gets lucky and hits the oops I win button. One that I think of in that category is like using Squirrel Nest and Earthcraft. I remember playing this in one of my cubes where it's like Earthcraft is just great. It's just an incredibly powerful ramp card.
It's a messed up ramp
Squirrel
card
Nest is okay as well. Just like make a bunch of tokens slowly over time, and every once in a while I'll draw the two together and hit the oops I win button. And yeah, I mean that's again, it's the whole deck cannot be all about just playing that combo. Like that would have been
you would need like 4 or 5 tutors and like, you know,
it's like my deck has to be set up to use the ramp and use the tokens, but if it can, sometimes I'll get to do the combo
and not just die and not have any way to win the game if your opponent does have a disenchant, right? Like you can't just be dead on board. And like even the most committed Mind Over Matter decks I've drafted are not like you removed Mind Over Matter, I lose now. It's like, all right, well now I lost my combo finish. Now I'm going to have to
attack
win
you with
Arcanus or Kamal Beats, and I've done that too. I think Persist is probably the perfect quintessential fair combo deck that a lot of people are used to in cubes with a combo finish. You're playing just usually an Abzan or some sort of permutation of Abzan, like mid-range deck with some hate bears and some like creatures with relevant abilities. But then if you get a sack outlet and a persist creature and one of the persist enablers that keeps you from putting counters in your creature, then you get to do that thing infinitely. And that deck kind of just, as the turns go on, walks up that spectrum I described earlier of like, now I have a 2/2. That's fair magic. Now I have a 2/2 that, gets ++1 counters. And like, that's now better because this other card, cares about having counters on it. And then I play a sack outlet, and now I can do this thing as many times as I want, but I still don't have a way to kill you. And then I get the thing that's actually the payoff that kills you, and it kind of like ramps up as it goes.
Right, just like either getting increasingly more efficient or assembling components that altogether will be a machine that does a loop, but still doing each of those individual parts is still netting you some value in the game state.
Mm-hmm. And what I have really liked about having combo present in the 100 Ornithopters cube, in the Neoclassical cube, in the Turbo cube even, or the irregular cube, the other cube you referenced with the Earthcraft Squirrel Nest combo, I have loved as a player knowing that I have an out in my deck, even if I'm way behind. And I think that is one of the best things that combo can bring to an environment, even if it's incredibly unlikely. I think I described on our Saltbox recap episode that I was playing the Neoclassical cube and had a very fair black-green Reanimator deck that was just, playing a mid-range strategy. It wanted to curve Deranged Hermit into like other big threats and just sort of beat your face in. But if I got Deranged Hermit and Recurring Nightmare and one of my, I think, 2 sack outlets. There's not a ton of sack outlets in that cube. I think I had like Phyrexian Overlord. What's the 5-mana guy that can sacrifice creatures? I forget his name. I'll put it in the cards mention page.
Isn't he just the rock?
Yeah, exactly. The rock guy. That allows me to sacrifice Deranged Hermit, play recurring... Oh, and Earthcraft. Earthcraft
is it Plague Lord?
Phyrexian Plague Lord, yeah. I had to have Earthcraft too. It's the part I forgot. So it's a complicated thing. It's like 4 cards at this point, right? Recurring Nightmare, Deranged Hermit, a Sack Outlet, and Earthcraft. And what that allows me to do then is not even win the game on the spot. What that allows me to do is sacrifice Deranged Hermit, get it back with Recurring Nightmare by sacrificing one of the squirrels, and then I have 5 new game pieces.
Do that to a squirrel.
Then I have 5 new game pieces I can tap for mana with Earthcraft. I can use 3 of that mana to replay Recurring Nightmare and do it all over again, given that I can sacrifice the Deranged Hermit to the Sack Outlet. If I don't have a Sack Outlet, I can do this as many times as I have 1 additional mana for, right? Because I get 5 mana out of it, but it costs me 6 mana to play Recurring Nightmare twice, so it does a lot of synergy even without that. But because I had that sort of convoluted line in my deck, I actually just played Tendrils of Agony and Yawgmoth's Will in my deck, and I was like, this game goes long, I could absolutely just, in one turn, go from being dead to just winning the game. And I had a couple games against Sylvia where I was so disadvantaged. I had gotten upheavaled, and there was tons of mana on Sylvia's side of the battlefield. And if I didn't have that combo, I would just scoop. But instead, I was like, I have a line here. I have an out. And it's a really ambitious out. It's unlikely to happen. But that, I think, is pretty fun. It's pretty fun to know that as the game sort of starts tipping in one player's favor, that there are sort of pretty big swings in terms of comeback mechanics. Like, I think of combo as like, at its best in cube design, it's like a cool comeback mechanic that Magic doesn't have a lot of comeback mechanics, right? Like, I remember when I was making my battle box, I was specifically looking for cards that were good when you're behind and not good when you're ahead. There's tons of card in Magic that are good when you're behind and also very good when you're ahead, right? They just putting another creature in play, good in both situations. But like, really, it's kind of like board wipes are one of the only good ones where it's like, all right, you're behind on board, this card is going to be good for you, and if you're ahead on board, it's going to be bad for you. But aside from that, there are very few other cards ever printed that just really benefit you from being behind. Because of that, I think that in the Bun Magic Cube or in the regular cube, if you were to like graph the player advantage bar, the player advantage bar you see on coverage where it's like, going back and forth between different players, I think for the most part in those cubes, it's going to like start slowly trending one way and it's going to kind of tip, and it's pretty rare there's a big snapback and it goes like, all right, now the favors like dramatically bounce back, and even more rare that it goes back and forth multiple times because we're playing very fair Magic. It's about this resource management, and those resources, as you start to gain an advantage, is going to snowball into more of an advantage. And I like that kind of Magic a lot, to be clear, because I think getting to that point in the game where you can start to accrue an advantage over your opponent is fun and challenging, and it's not like it's prescriptive and as soon as you get any kind of advantage, the game is over. But it's very different to have a potentially huge swing in tempo or resources in your deck via some sort of combo, which I've really enjoyed playing with. And honestly, my biggest revelation is that coming together very infrequently is a feature. It is not a bug. Like, my initial impression was like, oh, I have to make the Degenerate Microcube where the decks are smaller because otherwise I'm just never going to get to do Dark Depths and Thespian Stage. That's maybe not the best example because Dark Depths is so committal without Thespian Stage. It's just a land that taps for no mana. It's not very good. But,
it's an easy 30 mana win the game.
That's true, but my perception was like, well, if my deck is doing this, I have to do it every game, and I can't do that in a 40-card deck, so I'm going to make decks smaller. And actually, I think maybe the ideal way to play with combos for me is to have your combo in your 40-card deck, and it comes up once every 6 games, once every 9 games.
You shouldn't smoke the whole pack of cigarettes all at once.
Turns out that was not a good way to punish your son.
And not cool.
Not cool, Dad. Not all right.
Cool. All right. Cool. All right. Kick it. Cool. All right.
Not all right.
I'm wondering if it also can make it more fun on the other side of the table as well. I feel weird bringing this up because you're going to be like, Anthony, you're so haunted by this game. But I was watching a player at the Sawbox play, and they had such a commanding lead, and I was like, oh, this is great. She's going to win. I'm going to walk away, and I'll come back and see what she's doing in the next game. And then came back, and their opponent did not attack for lethal, and their opponent then on the next turn assembled a combo that meant...
Oh, yeah, you are harmed by this game. It's true.
It was, Uncle Istvan and Pariah, so it wasn't even a thing that ended the game. It just meant you can never win now. And I think that lesson of, don't give your opponent an extra turn is so valuable. And I think that for me as a player, it's been fun to kind of learn that lesson in a few different ways of just, if you can find the way to close out the game, do not give your opponent an extra turn. So maybe it does keep us a little bit more honest on the other side of of the table as well.
That's actually a really good point, because I do think in an environment without combo,
you can be lazy.
Well, no, it's not lazy. There's actually another Saltbox game I can reference. I mentioned the game I played against Andrew where I had Cruel Ultimatum in my hand and I had Cruel Ultimatum mana, and this was in the French Vanilla Cube, which I think is a great example of the kind of cube where there is not a combo. There is nothing resembling a combo. There's barely anything resembling synergy.
If I know Max, there's one random combo in there.
I don't think there is. I mean, the cube is very much about Magic fundamentals, and so that's the kind of cube I think where if you get an advantage, it's oftentimes hard for your opponent to like flip the script and have a big comeback moment. And in this game against Andrew, I had the advantage. I was pretty advantaged. And because I was advantaged and I knew this was the kind of environment where like he was very unlikely to have some huge swing, I was like, I'm not casting Cruel Ultimatum. I'm going to wait and cast literally anything else as long as I'm still advantaged, right? Because I want to exhaust him
Get
of any...
those counterspells.
I want to exhaust him of any counterspells. I want to like push his answers as far as I can go, and then this will be like the final nail in the coffin when I finally exhausted all of his resources. And if that's a cube where I know that in any given turn he can just draw a card and combo off, then I'm casting Cruel Ultimatum much sooner. I'm like, have it now, because I don't want to give you as many turns as you could possibly draw your combo, your Uncle is fine, your Pariah, whatever. I just want to like get this over sooner rather than later, which is I think a way that objectively in a meta where combo is present, you should play differently and maybe play in a way that's just better for everybody, right? Like maybe it's not good to play the sort of safe line of like, I know that you might have a counterspell, so instead of Cruel Ultimatuming you, which you would probably just scoop to, I'll just play this 5-mana 5/5. That's pretty good. What are you going to do about that? That'll kill you in 6 turns, like that sort of slow rolling, which is maybe strategically optimal.
They have 2 blockers, I'm assuming.
They had some blockers. They definitely have blockers. But that sort of slow rolling may be strategically optimal in a more fair environment, and it may not be in a combo sort of meta, and that could be good for the table.
Interesting thought.
And in the editing booth, I just got to add one more piece of nuance to this as I'm sitting here editing it, which is that I think the other thing this does for players that are playing against a combo deck or a deck that has the potential for a combo finish is it changes your decision matrix when you're ahead, right? You always have to think about what can my opponent have that would cause me to lose this game, and in a fair environment, when you're way ahead, oftentimes the answer is kind of nothing, or you have to get extremely unlucky, right? You got to like just draw nothing but lands for a few turns, and your opponent has to have, incredible top decks, something that you really have no control over. But when you know that a combo is possible, then you can play around it. You can, know that, okay, the one way they're going to be able to come back from this game is by assembling this creature-based combo, so I'll hold this removal spell in case that thing eventually happens. And just adding that texture again to what it's like when you're playing ahead, to be not just about, playing optimally from a resource management perspective and, really tight, but instead actually, more consciously thinking about your opponent's outs because they're not just a string of bad beats for you, I think does add a little bit of depth and interest. I do want to tease out the corollary to this, the sort of pessimistic view, because I feel like in a lot of ways, this is me sort of arguing with my past self, the straw man of my past self that was like, these combos cannot really coexist alongside fair decks, and it's all about doing it consistently, and so we got to build a whole separate cube for it.
My straw man is Farmstead Gleaner.
Your straw man is Farmstead Gleaner. That's true. Everyone's favorite straw man. But I think where this can go awry, right, is instead of being a cool comeback mechanic that like gives you an out in like a rare situation, you can have combos that basically do negate all of the decisions made up until that point in the game, right? And I want to be clear about what exactly I mean by this, right? Like in the Bun Magic Cube, I often describe it as a fair cube. And what I mean by fair is like every deck has to care about tempo and has to care about card advantage, right? Whether you're playing aggro, mid-range control, you have to care about those things. You have to care about how many cards are in your opponent's hand. You have to care about how many creatures they have in play. You have to care about what the clock is. You have to care about who's the beatdown. Like I want those things, those abstract ideas, to be at the forefront of every player's mind in every game, no matter what deck you're playing. When you have a deck that can just combo off, those things matter a whole lot less, right? It does not matter if you draw more cards than your opponent. It does not matter if you have way less life than your opponent. It doesn't really matter what the clock is as long as you get to draw the right cards, which are your combo cards, and do it before you die, right? So the clock just becomes like, how many turns do I have before I have to find my combo? Not this sort of more interesting back and forth of, can I change my sort of pressure to make it so that it becomes a race instead of just me being down? And I think when combos do negate all that other stuff, it can be a bummer. It can like really make your opponent, or if you're the one playing the fair deck, feel like you thought about all those things and none of it actually mattered the entire time because your opponent just had these combo cards. And I don't have a great explanation as to why I have not felt that almost at all playing Neoclassical Cube and 100 Ornithopters and even Turbo Cube, right? Like, all the times I played those cubes and done a combo or been on the receiving end of a combo, it has felt like, yeah, you know what, the game went really long and I didn't have enough pressure to get you dead sooner, and I got to the point where you had drawn 2/3 of your deck and had 15 lands in play, so like, yeah, fair, I lose, right? Like, it never feels like I am being like cheated or something, you know?
I mean, I think that's also a component of just having played the game for a really long time. Like, I think early in Magic, you'll be like, oh yeah, like I have 3 creatures, you have none, I'm winning this game, this is great. Like the number of cards in hand, it's just something that new players don't think about. And then at some point you get to the level where you're thinking, oh no, my opponent's up 4 cards from me. It's like the board state matters a little bit, but
not really.
Those cards matter a lot as well. And like understanding the particular matchup, and are you going to have time to deploy all those resources that you have? And so maybe that's like part of it. Like, you have built in the expectation that, yeah, if you generate enough resources, eventually you will be able to have a combo. Like, that is part of the inevitability, part of the, I forget sort of like how he described it in The Beauty of Games, but this kind of like probability matrix of things that can happen. And the more that your opponent just has time and resources, the bigger that section of they will combo off gets in your probability matrix.
I will cop to this though. So last night I was playing the Triple Cons Cube, which is basically
just a perfect recreation of Triple Cons draft.
Very close to perfect. Nate has cut cards that just don't make sense and limited.
Sure.
Like, there's no fetch lands in there. I mean, they help a little bit with Delve, but mostly it's just a distraction because there's no fetchable duels or anything. And he also cut the cards that are just like clearly meant for
Siege Rhino.
No, not that, but like Ugin's Nexus, which is a punisher for taking multiple turns. Like, that's just not a thing that is played in there. But aside from like a few sort of egregious cuts, it is basically just Triple Cons limited. And there's no combos there that I'm aware of. Like, it's an extremely slow and extremely fundamental Magic set, especially by modern standards. Like, everyone's playing vanilla creatures in their deck, basically, in Triple Cons, which is kind of crazy to think about by modern Magic standards. And I got a little salty last night.
Uh-oh.
Just a tiny
you
bit.
got salty?
I mean, maybe salty is the wrong word. I had the feeling of like, okay, well, this didn't matter, right? And I was playing Nate in the finals. I had just an Abzan deck with a bunch of big creatures and life gain and just like a good curve and nothing really incredible. No great bomb rares or anything, just like a good solid deck. And Nate was playing Sultai, and I learned in game 1 had Villainous Wealth. And this is the kind of format where like the fastest my deck can kill you is probably like if you put up any kind of, defense like turn 12, like I'm not killing you early because that's just not how this format works. I had one creature I could play before turn 3, right? That's just not how this format's very slow. And most of the things I played on turn 3 were just morphs, which were just 2/2s, and you're playing like, really below rate sort of vanilla creature. So in the last game of the night, I was massively advantaged. I had, I think, 47 life because of all the life gain I had going on.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I had Nate down to 1 card in hand, and I attacked him a couple times and had him dead on the next turn. And then he top decked Villainous Wealth and casted for X equals 11, I think. And I was like, okay, this feels bad. And the reason it felt bad
you gave him one more turn. You shouldn't have given him one more turn.
The thing is, like, I knew the entire time, like, I was not taking it slow. I was like, my deck is the more aggressive deck here, and
it's turn 16, time
Nate
to go.
has inevitability because Nate has Villainous Wealth, and that one card is more inevitability than any combination of cards in my deck could possibly offer. And so I literally just, like, I looked at the cards of Villainous Wealth, and I scooped. I was like, I'm at 45, but there's no way I win this game at this point. Like, it's just literally impossible. And I think why that felt bad, whereas some of these other situations maybe don't feel as bad, is, number one, it's not a combo. It's a single card. Like, Nate just drew Villainous Wealth, right? It's not like Nate had to combine a couple cards. It's not like there was any room for interaction. There was no, like, I'm going to play Arcanist and wait to untap with it. There was no possible counterplay, right? I have no counterspells in my deck, so my only counterplay is to try and kill you as fast as I can. I did my best, and you happened to just top deck it the turn before. So that's one reason it felt bad, was just that it's a single card, and there's no counterplay. The other reason is that it literally was the turn before he was dead. Like, it was like after all of this like grindy chewing through blockers and like, he did at some point like double Savage Punch my creatures and like wipe my board, and I had to start building up a board presence again. Like, despite all of that, I was going as fast as I could the entire time. I even used a removal spell on like a relatively dinky. It was a 4-mana 3/3. Just a 4-mana 3/3 of vanilla, basically. On turn 4, I used my Utter End on it, my like 4-mana exile target creature, because I had 2 morphs in play, and I was like, he has Villainous Wealth in his deck. While I would oftentimes want to save my Utter End in this cube for just someone's biggest creature, I'm instead just I'm gonna like do the equivalent of tempo play here. I'm gonna remove a creature on turn 5 and attack with my 2 2/2s. That's the fastest I can go. I even made that decision. I think I made that decision correctly, and it just didn't matter because of like pure chance, right? So I think it is different in some ways, but like I don't want to have this whole conversation and they pretend like it's not possible to have that moment where a combo just negates the sort of tempo of an entire game. And then it does become bad expectation setting. And like, how can you set expectations if you do want to have combo present in an environment that like, it's a thing that can happen. And I think there's a lot of texture to what those combos look like, right? Like Villainous Wealth being a single card that you just cast in a environment where there's really no deck that can get you dead before you can like cast it for like substantial value is one thing compared to a 4-card combo that doesn't actually net any resources that you then need to have some other sort of payoff to actually win with. Very different sort of textures there.
That's fair. I mean, you're also on record many times of saying that if you have a 6-mana spell, it should win the game. And that was a 13-mana spell or whatever. Like,
I don't feel that way about triple cons.
Okay, sure.
In the Bud Magic
Fair.
cube, if you resolve a 6-mana spell, I think you should be heavily favored because that is the kind of cube where you can very easily die before you get to 6 mana.
And also think about how much fun Nate was having. Just like, if I draw Villainous Wealth, I got 3
here's
more
the other
turns
thing.
to draw Villainous Wealth.
Here's the other thing about this stupid card, is that it's like, it's a cool payoff because you get to play with your opponent's cards. Nate never got to do that.
You just scoop.
Well, the game is just over. Like, it doesn't matter what the card does. It might have well just been a fireball to my face. Like, it could be anything. You could have milled me out or, like, fireball me to the face. The fact that it happens to steal cards from the top of my deck, it's all irrelevant. You just paid big mana to win the game. So, like, where's the fun in that, I guess?
Big summon the pack energy.
I guess the fun in that is, like, maybe sometimes you have to cast Villainous Wealth because you're going to die otherwise, and you only can pay for X equals 2 or 3, and you, like, cross your fingers and hope it's good. But that card does not spark any joy for me, is what I will say.
What did Villainous Wealth do to you?
It killed me when I had 1 turn left. I was going to kill Nate.
Right, but I mean, in the
board.
past.
Nothing. I had a very neutral opinion of the card until last night.
Okay.
And
so
to Nate's
we know what
point,
happened.
and Nate's like, I grumbled about it a little bit. I was like, nice job drawing your bomb. Cool.
And he was like, thank you.
No,
That was very smart of me.
well, yeah. First of all, I want to point out something else Nate did in this draft last night, which is in pack 3. I was playing Abzan, and in pack 3, I saw a pack that I was going to wheel exactly 1 card from, and it had both this cool 5-mana elephant that's like a rare payoff for the Abzan deck. That's not broken. It's nowhere near as good as Siege Rhino, but it's like a 5/7 that you get things with bigger toughness, something good happens. I forget what it is. Something I have to do with +1/+1 counters. That was in the pack along with Sandstep Citadel, my like on-color tri-land. And I had enough playables, and I was sitting right next to Nate in the draft, and I was like, dang, this is kind of a bummer of a pick. And he was like, oh, remember what it is for later. And I just showed him. I was like, I want both these cards, but I'm never going to wheel the other one, so I'll just be, be responsible and take my land. Pack comes around, and Nate shows me that he got the elephant all the way on the wheel and then took it from me, basically, and was like, you don't get to have this. Take this like stupid red card you can't play instead.
I mean, Nate is like a combo, just keeping you honest. Why did you do that?
I thought we were drafting with our buds. I thought we were all friends here, and we all want everybody to have a good time.
Know you can, when you got less than 7 cards in the pack, you can share a joke with the person downstream.
It was 8 cards. I was going to be passing exactly 8 cards.
That's why it was a mistake. Less than 7.
Apparently, I shouldn't have done that. And then he was like, "Yep, I took it from you. You can't have it." And I'm like, "Are you even going to play?" He's like, "No, I can't cast it. It's fine."
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Anyway, I think Nate should be looking deep in the mirror.
No,
at that
I think
decision.
that was a you. That was a you
Nate,
mistake.
I think you should be looking deep in the mirror about. Well, first of all, I mean, I'm never trusting Nate ever again. So, I mean,
I think you can trust Nate very well at this point.
No,
to do exactly what's reasonable.
No, it's not reasonable. It's mean. It's rude. Anyway. We got to go to dinner, but that's the end of our combo discussion. At the end of these conversations, I never really know if we've made our point at all, but I hope we've expressed some of the range of what combo can be in your cube, and that you as a cube designer, I think, if you've ignored combo because of you've felt similar ways to the way that you or I have maybe felt in the past, like this doesn't have any place alongside fair decks, or it's going to be too consistent and broken, or you're never going to get to do it, and that's going to feel bad. If you've ignored it for one of those reasons, maybe give it a try and see what you think about it, because I think depending on the nature of the combos, they can actually add a lot of excitement and comeback potential to an environment, which is overall, for me, been a net positive.
That's very fair. I do think that some of the negatives that we mentioned earlier do still stand, and especially if you're playing with a mixed experience level group, those are especially the kind of like feel bad moments of newer players not having either the expectations or the trivia knowledge to be able to feel like they have some agency in those types of games. I think that's real, but you know the people that you're playing with, and think about it.
Here's the one last thing I'll end on. I think, as Cube designers, we hold ourselves to a very high bar for what we want a Magic game to look like. Every time I watch competitive Magic of any kind, competitive limited, competitive constructed, I'm like, a lot of these games are bad. Like, if these games were happening in my Cube, I would be like, I'm not meeting my goals. Because
so what you're saying is that we're great.
I think Cube is the greatest format because we can afford to have a high bar for what our games look like, but for every game that somebody combos off and it feels like the rest of the game was invalidated, how many games did somebody just get mana screwed? Like, the game just has a lot of variance in it. So we can only be in control so much. And I think if you're like too worried about there being a non-game every once in a while, you got to it's just non-games in Magic. It's just how it works sometimes. You're
That's
gonna
true.
Get flooded, you're going to get mana screwed, you're going to mulligan to 5. Like, this all just happens and means that you're like massively disfavored because of some element that's outside of our control as a Cube designer. So I don't think we should be so afraid of the occasional nonsense game.
Fair enough.
All right. All of our music is produced by DJ James Nasty. All the Magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast. This podcast is produced by Thinking Really Hard About Magic Cards and Speaking to Microphones About It. Anthony, thank you for the combo of the gift of Cube and the gift of friendship.
What a powerful combination. I mean, the two really they do so much more than the sum of their parts. If I only had friendship or only had Cube, actually, only friendship would be pretty good.
Only friendship
goated. Does stand up.
You heard it here first.
It's more of a mid-range with a combo out than a control with a
you want a friendship
finish.
with a cube finish. You don't want a cube with a friendship
Let's not
finish.
read into that too much.